is going on? Welcome to a very special episode of the Nintendo Powercast. I'm your host, N64 Josh, and I have a very special player too. My Uncle Ken is going to be joining me for this. This is just kind of a bonus episode. We're not covering any news today. We're not doing anything like that. We're just going to take a trip down memory lane, and more than likely hear some embarrassing stories about me. So we're gonna start this thing off and just kind of get to know my Uncle Ken a little bit and find out about how he started out gaming. We're gonna go back in the way back machine. So where does it start?
Oh, are you talking to me?
Yeah, yep, talking to you. Yeah. You're good.
Well, we had those little LED machines playing football on back when I was a kid.
Oh,
yes. Fun
yes.
stuff. Pong, of course, was a big deal. And then Atari 2600. Big thing. If we weren't in the arcade, you were playing at home on 2600. Spent all the money I made on games. Got to the point where I renting them out to friends or trading with other people that had them and stuff like that. Yeah.
We were just playing on the Switch until about 2 a.m. the other day, playing old Atari games from the Atari Flashback and
Adventure.
Yeah, he went through. I'll post a picture on Twitter. He went through and found the
Microdot.
The Microdot and the Easter egg that you can see in Adventure. So if you guys have seen Ready Player One, you'll know what we're talking about. But I'll post that on Twitter so you guys can see it. I made sure to save it to the Switch. And but so this guy's the reason I have a drug problem, game problem. And so, probably the reason I'm even here doing these kind of shows and everything, because I got so into gaming so young. What do you remember? Like, you took me to the arcade. I played your Atari. Like, do you kind of remember just getting me into this stuff for the first time, or introducing me to it? Or, yeah, I mean, it's like what, over 30 years now, so it's been.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember specifics, but I do remember you were just always, like most kids, you were fascinated with the video stuff, And so when I was a kid, I didn't always get opportunity to play like pinball or whatever. Come on, it's time to go. Don't do that. So I was an older teen and drive, and I would take you places and do stuff that I wanted to do when I was your age and couldn't.
Right.
And so we went out indulgent Saturday afternoons, playing whatever games you wanted, going whatever you wanted for food, just having a good time.
Yeah, lots of Excite Bike and Asteroids and all kinds of stuff. That's for sure. I remember we had the ice cream stand in the mall that had the bubble gum in the ice cream that my parents very rarely let me get, but you had no problem letting me get that. And the gum was always so nasty in those things too. Like, it just.
But we looked forward to it, didn't
we totally did.
Why? I mean, what's wrong with us?
We totally did. So, but there's a battle going on underneath us right now with dogs. So we're just doing this thing live. I don't even know what's happening exactly, but so I would borrow games all the time. Like I lived on a farm when I was just a young kid, and he was living with his brother right next door to us. And so oftentimes I would go, if he was off of his shift or whatever, I'd go borrow games and then take him over to the neighbor's house and play. And so I'd play games like Pitfall and things like that. But like looking back, and those were some, like Phoenix and Pitfall, those were some of my favorites. For you, I know this is a Nintendo show, but we're going to talk a little bit about Atari just because that's where it started, right? And so, what were some of your favorites on that system?
Adventure was absolutely one of my favorite games, just because you could keep replaying it. I don't know, they just got the balance just right. When you pick the third game, Adventure, it's randomized, just enough fun in it. Playing like computer text games and stuff, so you had to use your imagination. Mm-hmm. The graphics didn't really bother about the gameplay. So there were several games. Crypts of Chaos was one of those. It's awful visually. Really cool. It's like playing Dungeons & Dragons. Yeah, I like that. I liked Asteroids, Space Invaders. And it gets repetitious. I
Right.
remember trying to roll the counter over and stuff like that. No pause button. Just had to hardcore and do the whole thing all at once.
Interesting. I didn't realize you couldn't even pause. The looking back, like we just grabbed that Atari flashback on the Switch, and so we were playing through a lot of these games, and when you compare them to modern games, it's kind of like this is like this is it. You know what I mean? Like I played a boxing game, and it's like there's two boxers on the screen, and when you beat that guy, you play that guy again. Like that was kind of it. There wasn't a ton of variation, but you look back at that time period when there was nothing at, like this was it. This was the
It was all new, and so it was exciting at the time. But even then, you would buy certain games, and you pay $35, $40 for them, whatever they were, depending on where you're buying them. And you get them home, and because the cover art is all exciting and reading about
yes.
the story, and then you go, wait, what? And you start to play it. So we figured out we would trade with friends instead of them going and spending $30. We'd trade for a week. There was games like Yar's Revenge and stuff that were pretty good. There was some repetition to it, but also it sped up and got harder and play a little.
Well, a lot of times, even though some of those games had the repetition to them, if you were going for a high score, that was a big deal.
Right.
Back in those days with some of those games. But there was like looking at that boxing game in particular, I'm like, I mean, I guess you could go for the high score, but it doesn't seem like much of an objective when you're boxing.
Right.
It was, and when I think about boxing games, I think about like Mike Tyson's Punch Out, which is essentially just a puzzle game that you're just, or like almost like a rhythm puzzle game when you get down to the, you break it down all the way, and so you had different characters, but at the end of the day, it was just still figuring out patterns. Which I mean, that's pretty much most games throughout time. A lot of it boils down to patterns, but it was funny for me going and just trying some of those Atari games for the first time, because I had never seen boxing before. I tried golf and I was like, why is this guy swing like it would not be humanly possible to swing a golf club the way this
well, that's because the guys who programmed those were high when they did it, so they didn't care.
Oh man, definitely some funny stuff there. But so you got to see the transition of the huge arcade boom, then to the home console market with Atari, and then Nintendo kind of came in. But if I remember correctly from stuff we've talked about in the past, you weren't the biggest fan of Nintendo at first, right? Because it was kind of like, oh man, these guys are kind of taking over.
Right. Yeah. I just was like, what's going on? What's happening to my Atari here? I remember buying the Atari 7800 when it came out.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm not going to let this Nintendo thing squash my dreams. And then I found out they had to give me the model at Toys R Us off of the shelf because it was the last one. They weren't restocking them anymore.
Oh no.
So I do still have that one because it plays 2600 games. I have like 40 or 50 cartridges, so I wanted to play it. But I remember watching you play, and then they had Duck Hunt, which was actually really popular in the arcade, and it was really a good translation of it. All right, maybe this whole be okay.
Right. Well, it's funny. Like I was just even finding out the history of Nintendo and Atari, and I again, there's it seems like stuff comes out like all the time, but I was watching a YouTube video recently about how like Nintendo and Atari almost struck up a deal that the NES would have been an Atari system that they distributed, and Nintendo would have been in charge of games, and like they were almost, I think they flew to a certain location to even get to sign the paperwork, and everything just went south right at the last possible minute. So it's just really, really interesting to see. And I mean, you see that with the plate, like PlayStation wouldn't be a thing if Nintendo hadn't screwed them at a conference when they were supposed to be making the Sony play or the Nintendo PlayStation, and then they're like, oh no, we teamed up with Philips Magnavox or whatever, and Sony's like, what? The ink is still wet. Like what's going on here? Yeah. So I mean, we spent a lot of time in the arcades. Like I said, we played, definitely played some Nintendo, played a lot of Atari, that kind of stuff. But I think where we ended up where we played the most was more my like early teens and stuff. As far as like Super Nintendo, we played that a lot. Like, I mean, we would have hours and hours and hours in Mario Kart and Super Mario World and things like that. Like, I can the ghost house tracks on Mario Kart. We would do time trials. I mean, we would do the battle mode. We would race against each other, but I think we started having the most fun passing the controller back and forth, just playing Mario Kart. Are there any of those Super Nintendo games or anything that kind of come to mind that we used to play? I know like Mario World, and I know some Street Fighter, because you had your kids were super young. So
I was gonna say my kids came along, and so my memories are a little bit more blurred of as far as I just remember the time that we put in, and it was fun. It was family time. But my kids being as fascinated with stuff as you were when you were little,
right?
But now you were older, and sometimes even watching and babysitting, whatever. And so it was, all of a sudden this generational thing, which was very cool. And then my daughter, who was the ultimate button masher, was beating people at Street Fighter. She was like 6 or whatever. I don't remember, but she was really young, and they couldn't believe it. They thought she was just cheating something. And I just thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, so many memories back then. And the thing that the other system that we ended up putting probably way more time in than we should have, ignoring our wives and everything, was the Nintendo 64.
Oh, yeah. I remember when my wife came home with mine, and it even had the expansion pack and Perfect Dark, and I went, "You're not going to see me for like 3 weeks. What have you done?"
Yeah, that was such a huge deal back then, that expansion pack. And we would play. You remember some of the game modes we would play on Perfect Dark? Like, we would set up like a dark turtle sim.
Yeah, and then lots of meat sims.
Yes, just mowing.
And it turned out we were the meat sims, right? Because we found the right balance to that. It was so hard to kill.
Yep.
If you didn't work together, you would end up dying. Oh yeah, we have some ultimate combination.
Yeah, the different modes, and we would just like. I was newly married or even dating my wife at the time, so we would just show up, and thankfully my aunt and Jen would just like play cards or talk about whatever they talked about, and we would game. And we would take breaks. We'd play some Uno and Killer Uno,
We did too all together, grilling and everything else. But yeah, the games were definitely the center stage thing.
A lot of and they would play Mario Kart with us. I remember countless hours of screen watching while people hit the lightning bolt as you go over Wario Stadium.
You suck! Yeah. I have to go all the way around again!
It was the worst. That was the worst. That level's never made it into Mario Kart since either. So, like, that's the 164 track that hasn't come back yet. So, fingers crossed, Mario Kart 9. We're hoping. But, so, let's kind of just step back a little bit. Like, what has it been? I mean, you've seen gaming go from literally Pong to what it is now. Like, did you expect that back in the day, or like did you think it was going to be a fad? Did you think it was going to be something that you'd still be doing now, pretty much your entire life?
I think we did think we would be doing it now, but we were sold something very different, which was like 3D gaming. You're going to stand inside a pad, with like inside of a room on a pad. The game is going to be all around you, and it's going to be virtual and all that stuff. And I still think we'll hit that at some point, but
it's like Ready Player One, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And we were told that in the 80s, this is what happened. Of course, it didn't get close, but they still had a lot of fun games. You were still in control of it. Like, I think some people were afraid that you wouldn't control anymore. So if you had the controller in your hand, like I can on whatever. But yeah, I guess I've always considered myself a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't think there would be a time when I had to stop, especially since my kids love it too. So that was something we did together. Continue to do together. They're adults now.
Right.
And so hopefully someday with grandkids, I don't want to be the old buddy daddy. Back when I was a boy.
Right.
We had one joystick and one button, and that was it.
Yeah.
That's true, but it moves on from there. It's still fun.
So I mean, you got to see, uh, and kind of from like an adult perspective. Like I was just a kid, so like seeing stuff like when Mortal Kombat came around and games started taking a turn towards more violence and things like that. Uh, were you surprised by that? Were you like, what did you think of just like society's response to that kind of stuff? Did you think they were going too far in one direction?
I suppose there's always some stuff that goes too far. Response over too. I mean, it's just a video.
Mm-hmm.
Too hung up. Certain. Can't separate this from reality. You've got bigger problems. It's not the video game. It's, anything can set you up. Well, if you decapitate people in a video, you want to be alive. Well, I'm sorry. I just don't see that as, it could be a trigger, but there's probably something else that would make you do it too.
Yeah.
Like having a machete and needing to cut the weeds or something. And all of a sudden, hey, I could somebody's head off for real with this. Oh.
Yeah, I've never had that urge after playing Mortal Kombat to pull someone's heart out of their chest. I don't know.
The only thing that's ever happened to me was playing Need for Speed. And you would cause those accidents to get the biggest insurance claim or whatever it was. And I remember leaving the house once. And I'm a full-blown adult. Should be grown up. Really not. And I'm driving down and I'm thinking about how I could hit the brake to power slide around the corner. And I'm going, no, wait! This is reality. That was like probably the closest thing to me.
Good old Need for Speed. You gotta love it. Gotta love it. I mean, so you remember taking me to the arcade back, way back when, and like, I mean, I remember we're gonna. I'm gonna see if I can remember some of these old games we used to play. But wasn't there a wrestling game that had a character that was Kamikaze Ken? Wasn't that
I think so.
Do you recall? Like, and it wasn't a WWF game, because they had those back in the day too, and those were great. Like, you get the Ultimate Warrior and things like that. But I think because that guy's had, he had Ken as his name, that always stuck with me.
It was the same with Street Fighter.
Oh, sure.
Because,
hey,
I can.
Yep, absolutely. And it was, like, my mom was super protective of me when I was, like, I couldn't, I've talked about it on.
She let you go out with me?
Yeah, I don't. That's a great question. I don't like. I couldn't watch the Smurfs. I couldn't. It was so bizarre. Like I couldn't do things that had magic in it. But Star Wars wasn't considered magic for some reason, so we were okay there. Just goofy stuff like that. But the one that I go back to that to me seemed to be like the biggest change in gaming was Mortal Kombat, and seeing just in the demo screen, they showed all the worst stuff in that game. It was like the best commercial possible for that game. When you see Sub-Zero pull someone's head off and there's a spine in his hand, connected to it, or Scorpion's pulling his mask off and burning somebody to just their skeleton, like. And you remember some games too, like what was it called? Time Killers, right? Like, oh yeah. This is a Sega Genesis game. It's very rare. You can find. I don't think it's super expensive, but it's not cheap and a little harder to come by. But I mean, I remember the game vaguely. I remember playing, like, didn't you like to play as a bug or something like that?
Yeah, it was whatever the space alien bug was, because his hands would turn into buzzsaws, float across the screen. So you could lop off every body part. But the guys with axes could do the same. Had to know.
You had like left arm, right arm, left leg, right leg, if I remember correctly, and if that got cut off, blood would just squirt out of that.
Yeah, and you could keep fighting with the other limbs if you were good enough. But you were at a disadvantage.
Yeah, so that,
and we laughed. We thought it was funny. People that I was playing, not because of that, but it was just so ludicrous. Like,
right?
You had to take that joke. Oh, I want to go out and chop people now.
I mean, even when I was little, it was always just kind of like, this is just awesome. Like, this is just pure awesome. There's nothing, like, I don't know. It didn't make me want to go and do anything violent. I was just more like, hey, this is getting. I mean, it's definitely not getting more realistic, but it's getting more entertaining. That's for sure.
Well, I would have thumped your melon too if you just started acting up. So.
This is also true. This is also true. But I mean, one of the most unique gaming experiences I remember in the arcade was you're gonna have to help me with the name. It was like Time. Um, it was a holographic game where you played as this cowboy.
Oh, I remember what you're going to talk about. I do not remember the name of it.
Yeah, the name escapes me right now, but that was one of the craziest things. That to me felt like this is going to be the evolution of the arcade.
Right.
You know,
it was supposed to be. That was supposed to be the next thing. You were going to see all kinds of that type machine. I think it maybe is the only one.
Yeah, I don't think there's another one, but you could put your hand through the through the screen, or it wasn't even a screen. It was just
the hologram.
Yeah, it was just projected, and it was something to do with Time Warrior or something like that, I thought, but I'll look it up here shortly. But it was so, I mean, it was like you walked into the arcade, that was the machine that you saw, like front and center, like $1.50 to play it or something. Like most games were, maybe 50 cents, or some might have been $1, but for the most part, everything was, relatively cheap. This was like, okay, you're going to invest a little bit here. What you've often told me some pretty killer stories about like playing Gauntlet and getting to levels. Like yeah. Share that story with these guys.
So when I was in high school and we were reaching the end, we were seniors, we realized this was probably going to be it. There was a Saturday. Each one of us brought $20 with. There was 5 of us. It's a 4-player game. And so we just took turns. Whoever wasn't playing would feed quarters for the other guys, because we said, we're going to reach the bottom of this game. We're going to get all the way to the bottom of the dungeon. And we never did, but we had so much fun doing that to this day, when I see those other guys, I had reunion a couple years back. Anyways, it came up. We still talk about it, because it's one of those things that you do. You have adventure with friends. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's out going somewhere and doing something, but this just happened to be the arcade because something did. It was crazy. There was people watching us.
Right.
Like the guy that's giving you change for tokens and stuff was even standing there just going like, wow, you guys are into this. You're doing this thing, It was funny. We had a crowd watching.
Well, hearing that, that there was a crowd and things like that, like you oftentimes mention like Twitch to somebody and they're like, why would you want to watch somebody play games? But like when you hear stories like that, or you even think back, I mean, if two of the locals at your arcade were the best at a Street Fighter or the best at a Mortal Kombat or whatever, if those two started fighting each other, that was a crowd. People wanted to see high level gameplay. Right. Like yeah. It's kind of always been there. Somebody's going for the high score on something, and you'll see a crowd. I can remember even one time you remember Killer Instinct when it came to the arcade? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I remember getting really good at that at home on the Super Nintendo, and I've told the story on here before, but like I had a line of grown men behind me, like, kid, how are you doing that move? Like, I don't know, just put your quarter up, buddy. You're next.
You're next. I'm taking you down next.
And so up until the point that then there'd be somebody that was like, oh, this is somebody on a whole new level here, looking at, seeing some of the moves they were doing. But I mean, to me, it's one of those things, like anytime you can see somebody doing something that's, extraordinary, or, they're really good at a game or anything like that, it's exciting to watch. So every time I hear that question about why would you want to watch somebody play games? Well, if they are really good at it, that's definitely a reason. And then, community is also another factor. I did pull up the it's from Sega, and it's called Time Traveler. That's the 3. There it is. Even seeing the pictures, like, there wasn't much going on the screen. It was like you were a cowboy with a revolver, and you'd see like 1 or 2 more characters show up on the screen at a time. And you get some of the pictures and stuff. I'm gonna pull up the images here. Like, you guys can check this out if you want. If you look up Time Traveler, even the machine itself just looked. it looked like something from the future. Like it was just
it's like a mini amphitheater, and all the holograms are inside of it.
Yeah, and you can go to the future and the past, and yeah, pretty interesting. It looks like there may have been no. I think that's the only. I think that's the only game. So I don't know.
I don't recall seeing anything like that afterwards. There may have been, but it probably wasn't.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, even the backgrounds are just like squares and rectangles and triangles, and like it's just kind of odd, but definitely worth checking out if you've never seen this machine before, because it looked like nothing else. It looked like nothing else in the arcade. But yeah, it wasn't cheap. That's for sure. I wonder what one of these things goes for now. Like
if it even still works.
Yeah, and then trying to get it to keep working would be interesting too. So what, like, you play Switch. You've pretty much kept up with all the systems throughout the years, especially the Nintendo systems.
I still have every one we have.
Oh, I love it. That's probably where I got that's another sickness I probably inherited.
Don't blame me for that.
But like, you remember when we introduced you guys to Animal Crossing and how you thought we were just out of our...
That was the dumbest thing. I was like, you're going to do what? In real time. This is stupid. It wasn't even, like an hour, maybe 2? Pretty soon I was like, hey, go over there. I think I saw a fish jump.
Yeah.
Get over there. Here, why don't you give me that controller?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the first night we got down to your place and we played that game, and it was, I don't know, 2 or 3 a.m. and we're like, okay, I think we've got all the fish we can get to sell for in the morning. Like, they're in our pockets are full. We got some hanging out in the house because it wasn't very big yet. We had just started the game, and then that. I mean, now we're kind of anticipating the next one coming out, of course, and.
What is it you said? You can't wait to be in debt.
I can't wait. Yeah, I can't wait to be in debt to Tom Nook. Yeah, that's what I tweeted out earlier this week. So but I mean, you guys, I've told this story on here. So what happened after you played Animal Crossing and you had to get your kids a GameCube or something, right? Isn't that what?
Yeah. So this is how, I don't know how bad a parent I am, or maybe you might think how awesome I am. I don't know which. But so we bought our daughter her own little TV for her room. It was a 13-inch black and white, or maybe it's color. But it has a VHS. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's on the bottom. They're playing tapes. And we got the family a GameCube. But we had bought them because they were on sale when we found them. It was like October. So we had to keep them hidden from the family. But we decided we need to make sure that they work. We had them set up in our room, my wife and I, and after the kids would go to bed, we would pull out the TV and the GameCube and game. And so when Josh called me one night and asked what I was doing, I told him. And he just wouldn't stop laughing because he was like, wow.
Like, I couldn't wait to pull this on my kids at one point. Someday I'm like taking notes, like, okay, this is parenting 101 right now. Like, get new console for kids and play it for 3 months before Christmas.
Well, that's the reason you have kids, so you can play with the toys ahead of time.
Right. Well, I remember hearing it all the time when I was a kid. Like, I'd get a candy bar and it never failed. Some adult was like, hey, I need to make sure that's not got poison in it. I'm like, I don't think it has poison in it, but
I'm not sure that's how you want to check it by eating it.
Yeah, that was just so funny, Had to make sure it worked, but yeah, no, I absolutely loved that because your wife and my wife have been playing that game. I mean, I think my wife has something like 600 hours on the newest Animal Crossing on DS. Like, they, and it's just funny because you do try to pitch that game to somebody and they're kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, why do you want to go into debt? Why do you want to work? That kind of stuff. So, I know some other games that you've really gotten into are games like Elder Scrolls and Skyrim and things like that. Like, did you end up, you played, we got you Skyrim last year for your birthday. Like, did you do anything crazy in that game that I know there's like some weird glitches and things like that? Did
Yeah, on the Switch, it's not quite the same as like on the PC because that's where I played Arena back in the PC. Yeah, but those were there were some of the craziest glitches. I remember just people would come over to watch me play. I think it was Oblivion.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, we would spend like an hour just climbing to the top of the mountain and throwing things off and watching the physics as they would bounce and flip. And, you'd kill a bear and throw it over and just watch him go head over heels all the way down, and it was just because, again, that was something newer. Like, you hadn't seen that level of what was happening before. And I remember just sneaking with a bow and arrow through the long grass and just exploring the world. And if I was doing it in the middle of the night, I would be startled if some monster would come out. It would scare the crap out of me. And I was like, what? I was fully immersed in what was happening. So much fun. And it's the same when you play Skyrim. You get into it. And all the things that you're doing that you don't get to do in real life.
Exactly, yeah.
I would hurt myself if I did that stuff.
Right. Well, and what's great about those kind of games is anybody can play them however they want. Like if you're, whatever you're into, like if you want to just adventure, you go adventure. A lot of times you get into like the, like making different potions and that kind of stuff, right?
Well, I got hooked on alchemy in Morrowind because I got stuck somewhere. I couldn't find my way out of this valley. I ended up, there was stuff in there to make levitation, whatever. I ended up getting myself out of it. This is cool. If you know the game Morrowind, it had some glitches in it. Increase your intelligence. Potions got stronger. New intelligence. It broke the game because potions way OP. Anyways, that was where I first learned how to do it, and just for some reason it feels.
Weren't you flying like out of the map and stuff?
Oh yeah, I remember I increased my speed so much that I ran to the island of Solstein.
It's like over water or something, right?
You're supposed to take, get to enough level and take a boat and go there. And so I kind of broke my game by just running across the water and finding it on accident. But again, it was one of those things you could do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not tightly scripted. Adventure any way you want it. You usually wind up dead because of it, but it was fun. Go make your own plan.
Well, how do the dragons in Skyrim compare to the dragons in Adventure?
You mean the ducks? The ducks in Adventure? The deadly ducks. Yeah, I love it. It's again, it's just incredible because in your mind, when you're playing those games, you're seeing something more than what's on the screen. That's just it's just representative of what's going on. But so now they've taken that in reality. It's just incredible to see some of those. People that are in their 70s play Skyrim, see the dragons come in, just their jaws drop open, and they're like, "What is that? What is going on?" They're just fascinated.
Yeah,
this is like watching.
Right. Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like just like like we talked about at the beginning, just watching Adventure, seeing those duck dragons. Even when they die, they just look like a dead duck. Like
exactly, with his head lolled back, its bill closed.
Yeah, and you literally had to use imagination with the with the games back then. But I even asked him when I'm like, so you would stay up till like 2 playing this, because you can beat that game what, like 5 minutes?
Yeah, it depends, but yeah, it doesn't take long.
So but if you
can always replay it.
Yeah, if you were into it back in the day, it's crazy.
Well, and we would make up we would put games in a row to play, like
a triathlon kind of thing.
Yeah, so like you would play Missile Command because you were defending your planet from the aliens, and then now we're going to go out into space, and so you'd play Star Raiders or whatever.
Yeah.
Once you destroyed so many enemies, then you switch to Laser Blast and say, okay, now I'm attacking their planet, and then you switch to another game. We would make stuff up just to make it even more fun than it already was.
Did you guys ever do competitions like that? Like who can okay, we're gonna do asteroids to a certain score and then switch to Pac-Man or things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Even then, even in the adventure game, we would have certain rules. Like you can't win until all the dragons are dead. That's not a thing in the game. You can just win by taking the chalice in. But we would say, oh no, you have to do this. And so then we would set some challenges. We would think about it. And then the next weekend when we get together or overnight party. Or okay, here's the deal: you have to have the bat locked in the White Castle before you can win the game. And that's not always the easiest thing to accomplish. So when you set, and then you would set the challenge for someone else, and then watch them try to beat it.
Right.
And they would have one for you and things. So again, just added games.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I mean, because you see. I mean, you've seen the Nintendo World Championships and things like that, where they basically do the same thing, where it's like, okay, we're and it depends. They've been doing them, I think they've had like 3 or 4 of them now, and so like, you'd see them playing like this goofy. It's kind of weird. They'll go and pull like these really obscure titles. There's one, I think it's called like, I think it's Bean something or whatever. I can't even remember the name. I found it on DS, and like this little bird has a tongue that grabs the beans as they're coming down, and this is one of the games that shows up at this competition, and then they're playing, Mario Odyssey and Mario Kart 8 and things like that, and so it's just it's crazy to see, but it's cool to hear that, like, you guys were in a sense making your own, not only competitions, but in a way making your own game. Like, okay, this is, from space to everything else. Like that's
right.
I never even, when I guess I was kind of doing the same thing due to just my like ADHD back then, but it was like, okay, Pitfall, okay, Phoenix, okay, there was like, I don't know, these don't tie together whatsoever, but like, okay, Pac-Man, here we go, but I would always get kicked outside to go play, and couldn't usually play for long periods of time. But are there any? But we'll kind of wrap up here. But are there any? What would be some of your favorite like Nintendo games that you've played throughout the years? It doesn't have to be like Nintendo made. It can, just on that system. I know we've mentioned Perfect Dark and Mario Kart. I think we played a lot of Tony Hawk and things like that.
Those ones were fun.
But are there in particular, like, even like, I'm pretty sure you play through Link to the Past and stuff like that on the Super Nintendo?
Yep. I remember calling friends to ask them, hey, how do you do this? How do you beat this part of it?
And just so everybody knows, my uncle does not work at Nintendo. I know everybody's uncle works at Nintendo, but mine does not.
No, but I did have a friend that worked at Nintendo, and one of the things that we would do was go to their house and, we'd hang out for the weekend and barbecue or whatever. And because it was part of her job to help people when they called in, that's a thing that you used to have to do. It wasn't email or whatever. You would call on the telephone and ask for help to get past an area. So she had to learn all these things. So we would sit and play Nintendo games, and she would be assigned certain ones. And Ghosts and Goblins, one of them. And we played the snot out of that game to try to find every way you could do stuff and the best way to do stuff and things like that. No,
it's all good. It's all good. Just some of the some of your favorites throughout the.
I remember Cool Spot being like a weird fun game.
Yeah.
Like, and the most annoying thing, you couldn't save.
Oh,
so it all had to go. You had to be able to like pause it and leave it sit.
Yes.
And then when you have little ones in the house, that doesn't always work out.
Or a mom that would like, why is this on?
Yeah. Wasted power. Turn it off.
Yeah.
Exactly. I had chess on the Atari 2600, and you could set it where it would take 24 hours to make a move.
Oh my gosh!
And if either of my parents saw it on, they would just shut it off.
Right.
And I would be like 3 or 4 moves into the game, so a good half a week or even more, and all of a sudden I'd come home and it was off. What did you do? Oh.
With chess, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
And just some of the games that are a little bit quirky. Like I said, Crypts of Chaos was one on Atari that.
Oh, interesting.
I'm trying to think for Nintendo some of the other ones. Oh, there was one. It was mini race cars.
Oh, Micro Machines?
Micro Machines. And it was cool in the sense of you were like racing around on a teacher's desk or something.
Right.
So there's rulers and pen cups and all these things. But the controls were not the best because when the screen would roll around, you were still going left and right, but you had to think opposite on the screen. And stuff like that.
Yeah. Controls were.
But if you
kind
could
of
get that
up.
down, it was stuff like that.
Yeah, like I said, we had hours and hours in Perfect Dark, playing through the story, doing co-op missions there. I mean, I'm sure we played GoldenEye some, but Perfect Dark is the game that I feel like. I mean, we were both on a race to try to get perfect on that game, and
Mine is still running. I still have my cheats.
still
No,
yeah
it's not still running.
yeah. We used to rubber band the controllers with the trigger
I'd go
on.
to work all day
Yeah.
and leave that thing with like the laser going.
Yep.
Hit the meat sims in the head.
Yes.
Yep. Then we figured out no lasers don't count as headshots or whatever it was. I don't know. We figured out we wasted so many hours and days.
Yeah, and it wasn't until like about a year ago I talked to somebody. They're like, "Oh, you actually had to kill human opponents, like in order to get to perfect. Like you had to rack up enough like player versus player kills in order to hit that number." But like I had 32 days logged in that game. Now I wasn't playing all the time, but then I, set up the 64 in my kids' room, and they actually deleted that save file, so it's gone. It's gone forever. But yeah, I'm just trying to think back too. Like I remember because you would have some different games, obviously, than what I would have. One of them I remember that you had on the Super Nintendo was like a Red Baron kind of game, like dog fighting and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you had to put a team together. Fly is different. So like one of them was a real good shot, one of them was a real good mechanic, so it would affect your plane or ability to shoot, things like that. And you would get medals if you went through and did well, and if they survived, and if they died, they held a little ceremony for them. And
funny.
They get medals. Biplanes, which was kind of almost more fun fight with because it's slow motion. You think a little bit more,
right?
Whereas with jets, it's just fast react.
Sure.
That's its own level of fun. Biplane, because there was actually an arcade game, Biplane.
Okay.
Me and one of my older brothers. That was souls. Every time we saw that game.
Yeah, love it. Love it. The other one I remember you used to play a lot was Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
Yeah. That was a thinker, that one.
Yeah.
I like the strategy games that also had some action.
And I remember seeing that game and just being like, what the heck is this? And then when I finally sat down to try it, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty fun. But I remember my initial response was like, this reminds me of reading a book. I'm gonna go do something else.
That should not be your response to that. What's wrong with reading a book?
It's kind of an ongoing joke with my community. Anytime there's like a tutorial, I'm like,
skip,
just hitting A, and they're like, do you know how to play this game? I'm like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, you and every other kid that was 7, just press the button. Why are you reading? Press the
button. Yeah. So one day I'll grow up and learn to appreciate tutorials, but no, yeah, just looking back, like trying to think. I mean, like I said, we played a lot of Super Mario Kart. I mean, even Super Mario World, I remember playing, like, there were times, playing through different levels of that. Like, that was a game I played, like, super religiously. Like, all 3 save files, I had all 100%ed, like I had the fall setting on everything, it had changed from spring or whatever. But yeah, and Zelda, I know. And I mean, looking back, like, were there any standout GameCube games other than Animal Crossing? Like Time Splitters, maybe?
Was a fun one.
Yeah.
Yep. Gosh, it's been so long, I don't know. I just know there were games that we put a lot of time in on. So much fun to play together.
And of course the Wii, I mean, your kids were older by the time the Wii and stuff came out, so like...
But that one was fun because even my folks, they were older, and they always appreciated the gaming stuff, but they weren't really into it.
Yeah.
But my dad, who was a bowler in real life and quite good at it, when I showed it to him, he was like, how can this be? He was hooked.
Yeah.
I remember he stayed the night at the house, and we were going to church the next morning. And like that was always a big thing with him. And he was like, hey, do you think we could get in a game before we go? And I was like, all right, yeah, we can do that.
Oh, man, that is hilarious. That's hilarious. But yeah, I mean, that system was, that system did so well because, I mean, it appealed. And I don't know that many people, my parents owned one, other than maybe Just Dance games. Do you think they had anything else on it? No, it was Wii Sports. Like that was pretty much it,
Well, they have it in the assisted living community. They use it there because they can just, it's usually make a motion, press one button, whatever it is. It's very easy to learn.
Yep.
And anyone can do it. They love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually really hope that we see the Wii sports games get ported over to the Switch, because I mean, other than the controller being a little bit different, I think you could do everything everything the Wii could do, and the motion control is even better. So, well, hey, this has been fun. Thanks for taking the time to do it with me. I appreciate it.
You betcha.
All right, guys. Well, hey, this has been, like I said, just kind of a bonus episode. If you want to be able to follow me, you can go to N64Josh or at N64Josh on Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. You guys know where you can find me. You want to follow the show, it's at NPowercast. And like I said, this was just kind of I'm totally under the weather right now. That's why I don't even sound like myself. We're still just kind of like, these guys are staying with us. We're still just kind of doing family stuff from the holidays. And so, but I know a lot of you guys had requested, like, okay, you've talked about your uncle enough. You got to get him on here. So
and now they will all be extremely disappointed.
No, there's not a high bar here with me, so we're good. So, but yeah. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you Thursday for our regularly scheduled show. Bye now.
Bye.